First, it was 28 days, then 28 weeks, and now 28 years. If you need a recap of the story and themes of the first two movies before 28 years later, we have the cure right here. Sometime around the turn of the millennium, scientists at the Cambridge Primate Research Center are trying to fix a problem that has plagued humanity for, well, millennia: anger and all the bad stuff that comes with it. Can we as a species be cured of violence, of rage? Using chimps as test subjects, the researchers created an inhibitor designed to enhance violent tendencies without any of the pesky mental restraint that keep most people from getting murdery during their morning commute. Then, in a stroke of what can go wrong, they made a delivery system for that inhibitor out of a modified strain of Ebola virus. The end result is apes infected with a highly contagious form of what is arguably humanity's worst impulse.
Infected with what?
Rage.
That's probably not a great thing to have, and it only gets worse when a group of animal activists get wind of the center's inhumane research methods and break in to set the chimpanzees free, inadvertently unleashing the rage virus on the world, or at least one large island. In order to cure, you must understand. So the virus was designed to be a perfect distillation of rage, and it is. Infected have one single goal with which they follow with blind, rabid determination: hurt as many others as possible. There's no other underlying motivation, which is part of the reason the infected are so terrifying. They don't eat or sleep, although they will go into sort of a dormant stupor in the absence of anything else they do. The rage virus also alters their physiology in a few ways. Their smell is enhanced, strangely enough, which doesn't come into play in the first two movies, but was mentioned in the tie-in comic 28 Days Later, The Aftermath. That's how the infected are able to tell the difference between their own kind and uninfected humans. It also most likely affects their eyes, since they seem to be slightly averse to sunlight and other bright lights. Maybe light is a little harsh on their blood-red dilated eyes. But whatever the case, nighttime is a particularly dangerous time to be out and about. That's not to say that daytime is totally safe, but it's safer. And if you ever have the option, don't use tunnels.
Then we should take the indirect route, the one that's in broad daylight and that's not underground.
There's one misconception that the infected are stronger and faster than normal people, but that's not entirely true. It's not that they're stronger necessarily, it's more like that anecdote of a mother using a surge of adrenaline to lift a car to save her child, but all the time. Their strength isn't enhanced, but it is uninhibited. No amount of pain or consequence will get between an infected and its quarry. The same goes for their stamina. Even though you can run, you aren't likely to be able to outrun. Eventually, you'll tire out. The infected won't. The rage virus infects its host with terrifying speed. You have about 10 to 20 seconds from exposure before you're violently hemorrhaging internally, vomiting blood, and thrust into a hyper-aggressive rage. And all it takes is a single drop of blood or spray of saliva to pass the virus from one person to another. One infected in a crowd will spread the contagion like wildfire, so it's no wonder that a crowded city like London didn't stand a chance. Only 15 days after the outbreak, the entirety of mainland Britain has been quarantined, as many people as possible were evacuated, and the rest were left behind to eat themselves, in a manner of speaking. As the days and weeks passed, the numbers of uninfected left behind dwindled rapidly, until only a few known people remained to scavenge through the wreckage and outlast the infected. What's particularly disconcerting for the survivors is that they're in a state of total blackout, with only rumors about what's happening to the rest of the world.
The day before the TV and radio stopped broadcasting, there were reports of infection in Paris and New York.
We find out later that reports like those were hoaxes, but they led the survivors remaining in England to treat the outbreak as a global apocalypse, opening up some interesting questions about what people will do if civilization is gone and there's no chance that there will be repercussions for their actions. As it turns out, the answers to those questions are pretty dark. So, back to narrative. One of those survivors is a guy named Jim. By a stroke of good luck, he was in a bike accident before the outbreak and spent the first 4 weeks in a coma in a hospital. 28 days later, he wakes up and finds himself alone in an abandoned London and trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Hello!
Jim is our first glimpse of the way the rules of society get thrown out the window during a collapse. With nobody else around, he pries open a vending machine, stuffs his grocery bag full of free cash, and momentarily seems pretty cool with the sudden state of lawlessness he finds himself in. And really, who wouldn't? But pretty quickly, he stumbles across the dark side of that freedom. With nowhere else to go, Jim wanders into a church, perhaps looking for safety or some form of guidance, or both. What he finds instead is the infected.
Hello?
28 days later doesn't gently guide you into the end times, it throws you in head first. When Jim goes further into the church, he comes face to face with an infected priest and realizes that any sense of normalcy is long gone. 28 days later has a lot to say about who people are deep down once the mask of civility comes off. Jim meets 3 different types of people in his adventures. The first is Mark and Selena. Fleeing the infected from the church, he's saved by a sudden barrage of Molotov cocktails. What's interesting is that the first one kind of seems to be aimed at him, suggesting that his rescuers weren't initially all that interested in rescuing him. Or maybe it was bad aim. Either way, he's saved by Mark and Selena, 2 efficient, no-nonsense survivors who teamed up by happenstance. Both of them had families before the outbreak, and they're now living in the grim reality that the next day is never guaranteed. They give Jim the short version of everything that happened during his time in a coma, and hammer home the idea that the only way to survive is to follow a few specific rules.
You never go anywhere alone unless you've got no choice. And less than 2, you only travel during daylight.
It turns out there's a third rule to staying alive, which becomes excessively clear when they accompany Jim to his parents' house the next day. Sticking with the rule of traveling during daylight, they hole up in the house come evening, but get attacked by infected in the dead of night. The encounter ends with Mark being bitten, and Selena illustrating the rule that compassion has no place in England anymore.
Wait.
Afterwards, she tells Jim that she'd do the same thing to anyone, including him, in a heartbeat, because friendship, family, and connection are always just one bite away from dissolving.
Staying alive's as good as it gets.
Cold? Sure. Necessary? It sure seems that way. But just as you're starting to think you're in for a relentlessly bleak apocalypse, a little warmth comes into the picture. The counterpoint to Selena is Frank and Hannah, a father and daughter who spent the outbreak scraping by in a high-rise apartment. Whereas Selena and Mark laid low in an underground shop hidden from everyone, Frank and Hannah haven't given up on the world. They want to be found, even hanging out a string of Christmas lights to broadcast the location for anyone with non-bloodshot eyes to find.
This is great. It's just great. Cause for celebration, I'd say.
Like everyone else who hasn't been infected, they're getting desperate for food and water, but Frank is still jovial and welcoming, eager to share the best of what they have left. And while Selena has survived by keeping others at arm's length, Frank and Hannah are carrying on because of the bond they share. Jim immediately warms up to them, but of course Selena sees all of that as a weakness.
You should be more concerned about whether they're going to slow you down.
Right, because if they slowed you down...
I'd leave them behind.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah.
One of the reasons Frank and Hannah are so optimistic is that they've been receiving a looped radio broadcast from a group of soldiers claiming to be stationed at a blockade 27 miles northeast of Manchester. Even more than the promise of military safety, the broadcast suggests they found a cure.
Just listen.
Salvation is here. The answer to infection is here.
Selena is completely against the idea of tracking down the source of the broadcast, but like Frank says, it hasn't rained in 10 days, and if they don't leave, they're going to run out of water. So, against her wishes, they wave goodbye to London and set off in Frank's car. It's not all doom and gloom though. They have some fun in a supermarket.
Irradiated.
They have some fun in a tunnel. And they have some fun in a gas station.
Break! Break!
And through it all, they start to see a little bit of the world from the others' perspectives. Remember how Selena started out as a hard-ass, kill-you-in-a-heartbeat type of survivor? Well, spending time with Jim, Frank, and Hannah softens her up a bit and lets her see things from a wider view. We don't know much about what her life was like before the infection, just that she had a family and they died during the outbreak. By all accounts, it was a good life. Seeing Frank and Hannah's love for each other reminds her that without meaning in life, it's, well, kind of meaningless, isn't it?
She's got a dad and he's got his daughter, so...
Cheeky monkey.
I was wrong when I said that staying alive is as good as it gets.
Alex Garland's script for 28 Days Later has a lot to say about mankind, endless cycles of violence and decay, and all that lofty zombie movie rhetoric. It's not particularly subtle about any of it, but it also makes a salient point about the natural world. When Jim and the gang finally get out of the city and into more natural surroundings, they discover that, as downtrodden and hopeless as life in the city has been, out here, the world is carrying on as if nothing ever happened. You could even say it's flourishing. Horses are running wild and free, flowers are in full bloom, and it feels like they've entered a world where rage and hate never existed in the first place.
Do you think they're infected?
No. Doing just fine.
Of course, nature is as violent as it gets, but this stopover in greener pastures seems to say that the violence inherent in nature isn't the point, it's simply an aspect. There's also beauty, and maybe for all the violence in humans, there are occasional glimmers of beauty there too. On the other hand, maybe it's just a narrative lull to give the audience time to breathe, because things are about to get much darker. After that brief pit stop, the road trip continues, and the next day finds them within view of Manchester, which is still in the process of burning to the ground. Worse, the army blockade has been seemingly deserted, effectively extinguishing their hope for salvation. Frank takes it especially hard because he had so much riding on this promise to finally get Hannah to safety.
Frank.
We have to go.
Yeah.
Go where?
In his frustration, he kicks a metal gate and dislodges a single drop of blood from a body on top of it. If you remember anything about this movie, it's probably this scene. Yeah, pretty heartbreaking stuff, especially after everything we've seen about Hannah and Frank's relationship. Watching Frank keep his distance as the infection courses through his body is a sudden and brutal reminder that nothing in this world is ever safe.
Stay where you are.
Dad?
Keep away from me!
Dad?
Keep away from me! Keep away from me!
Just as Jim is about to take care of Frank, the soldiers they've been looking for pop out of the bushes to do the job for him. They found what they wanted, but frankly, it came at a price. The soldiers take Jim, Hannah, and Selena to their headquarters at a country estate called Worsley House, where this guy, Major Henry West, explains that the radio broadcast wasn't quite being honest. They aren't in contact with the larger army. Their salvation is just a barricaded house, and their answer to infection consists of an infected soldier named Mailer, who's been chained up so they can see when he starves to death.
But don't worry. You're quite safe here.
In Major West's point of view, the infection hasn't changed anything vital about the status quo. It's just a different version of what he's seen his entire career, and the 4 weeks of infection comes down to the same old thing.
People killing people. Which is much what I saw in the 4 weeks before infection, and the 4 weeks before that, and before that.
The point he's making is that violence will always exist in society. It's endless and cyclical, and just as much a part of us as the blood in our veins. Of course, there's a counterpoint to that argument, the idea that none of it matters. The planet used to be just fine without us, and would be again, as reiterated by this helpful soldier.
So if the infection wipes us all out, that is a return to normality.
It's up to the viewer to decide which viewpoint they agree with, but as we're about to see, West might have the most evidence on his side. Remember how earlier we said that Jim meets 3 types of people in his adventures? West and the soldiers of Worsley House represent the third, opportunists, people who see the end as the beginning of their chance to reshape civilization as they see fit. These guys just happen to be the sadistic type. Worse than a white lie, the broadcast was actually a law to get female survivors to show up for the soldiers.
What do 9 men do except wait to die themselves? I moved us from the blockade, I set the radio broadcasting, and I promised them women.
Talk about out of the frying pan and into the fire. As soon as he hears that, Jim rushes off to get Hannah and Selena out of there, gets knocked unconscious, and gets taken out into the woods for execution. As far as the soldiers' needs go, he isn't particularly useful anymore. Jim manages to escape the soldiers by leaving the relative safety of the barricaded property, then happens to see a totally unexpected sign that the world isn't as far gone as they'd thought. A plane in the sky. Planes mean people, people mean civilization, and civilization means hope. And suddenly, getting left for dead in the rage-infested backwoods outside Manchester doesn't feel like the end of the world. So, Jim returns from near death as a gaunt, ghostly revenant, unleashing hell on the soldiers from the rain-soaked shadows. He uses the air raid sirens at the blockade to draw every infected in range of the woods, unleashes Mailer at Worsley House, and in the chaos he becomes death itself, unexpected and ever-present. His rabid brutality during this sequence is a direct mirror to the savagery you see in The Infected, reinforcing the movie's theme that lower impulses like rage are deeply sewn in the human tapestry. You can't watch it without asking what the difference is between him and these empty, fever-brained creatures, because the point is, there is no difference. Jim's intentions are noble, but he's perpetuating the same cycle of mindless violence Major West believes is part of us all. Even Selena can't tell if Jim is infected.
That was longer than a heartbeat.
So yeah, it's a pretty bleak outlook on people. Thanks, Alex Garland. But on the bright side, Jim does save Hannah and Selena, despite getting a bullet to the stomach, and the 3 of them escape to a pretty little house in the countryside. Over the next few weeks, Jim heals from his gunshot wound, and it seems like the worst is behind them. The infected are slowly dropping from starvation, all while Jim, Hannah, and Selena have plenty of supplies to ride out the rest of the crisis, and they've been putting their time to good use, fashioning a makeshift sign out of sheets and blankets to let airborne patrols know where they are. Against all the odds, it's a happy ending. Maybe the real message is that people can change after all. They've all adapted from loss, hopelessness, and unbridled rage, and found a way to push forward through it all with each other. That's as good as it gets. Correction, that's as good as it gets for a while, because eventually a sequel's gonna come along and undo everything, and 28 weeks later starts with humanity's less desirable traits rearing their ugly head again. Sometime before the hordes subside, a man named Don and his wife Alice are hiding in the countryside with a few other survivors when they're attacked by infected. As the survivors fall one by one, Don and Alice retreat to the top floor of the house, where they each make a single decision that will change their lives forever. Instead of escaping, Alice runs back to save a young boy, and Don doesn't.
Don! Help us!
Don chooses his own survival over theirs, leaving his wife and that boy to the mercy of the infected. He assumes his wife gets killed at that point. It kind of seems like a given, but it turns out that, while she does get bitten, she has a rare mutation that lets her act as a carrier for the virus without showing any symptoms. We'll get back to that later though. As the numbers of infected begin to dwindle in the months following the initial outbreak, NATO forces begin cleaning up. 18 weeks after everything went to hell, Britain has been declared cured, and a secure zone called District 1 has been set up on the Isle of Dogs in London to house survivors and returning refugees. By that point, 15,000 people have been relocated to District 1, and most of them have been given jobs cleaning up and rebuilding. While the infected are gone, the city at large is infested with rats and corpses and disease, and NATO is keeping a watchful eye on everything. But as far as they're concerned, the outbreak is in the past.
What if it comes back?
It won't come back.
What if it does?
If it comes back, we kill it. Code Red.
Two of the people who return are Andy and Tammy, the children of Don and Alice, who were on a school trip outside the country when the infected happened. And that's Don, who made it away from all those infected and got a cushy job in District 1, making sure all the amenities like water and electricity stayed up and running. When the subject of their mom inevitably comes up, Don tells his two kids most of the truth, but lies and says that he watched her go down with his own two eyes.
I tried to go back. She was already gone.
It makes sense. He doesn't want his kids to hate him, and there's no way she was getting out of that house alive once he ran away like a coward. So it's not like they'll ever find out the truth, right? Wrong! Tammy and Andy aren't supposed to leave the secure zone, but they sneak out anyway to get some mementos from their old house in the city. They get some mementos, alright, like their mom, who's very much alive and has been living in that house for quite some time by the looks of things. Alice is a new twist in the infection. The chief medical officer in District 1, Scarlet, thinks that her ability to get infected without giving into the mindless rage is linked to Alice's heterochromia. Her eyes are two different colors. It's not lost on Scarlet that Andy also has heterochromia, and she starts to guess that that mutation could serve as an indicator that a person is able to become a carrier for the virus, a trait that could lead to a cure. But before she's able to run any tests, here comes Don again. Whether he's looking for forgiveness like he says, or just some clarity that Alice doesn't resent him, isn't clear. It's also unclear if Alice knows she can infect him through a single kiss, but either way, she's not a savior in the end. She's a Trojan horse. She tells him she loves him and gives him a kiss, swarming with rage virus. And just like that, our desires destroy us once again. The cycle continues, and the rage virus spreads like a grass fire through District 1. This time, the army is somewhat prepared with a containment strategy in place called Code Red to bring a swift end to the virus if it ever makes a reappearance. Snipers patrol the rooftops to stop any infected in their tracks. If they get overwhelmed, the order comes down from the snipers to shoot everyone, infected and non-infected alike, indiscriminately, followed by a firebombing of the entire district. Spoiler alert, that's what happens.
Abandon selective targeting. Shoot everything. Targets are now free. We've lost control.
While this movie isn't making a lot of big statements about the moral questions of killing the relative few to save the many, it does have Doyle. Doyle isn't totally on board with the order to shoot living people and leaves his post to save a kid he sees in the streets below. Would Code Red have worked even if Doyle hadn't gone AWOL? Not at all, since the infected escape even after the area gets bathed in flame. But in a strange way, while the film positions Doyle as a hero for saving a couple people, he's actually responsible for getting a whole lot more people killed. So the kid he sees in the streets below is obviously Andy. Doyle teams up with Scarlett to escort Andy and Tammy out of the city, because Scarlett is convinced that the kids have the genes that could save the world from the rage virus.
So their lives are far more valuable than mine. Or yours.
Now that he's left his post and reached the point of no return, Doyle is all in on protecting Tammy and Andy, no matter what it takes. He's still in contact with his buddy Flynn, a helicopter pilot, and he gives Flynn a rendezvous point out near an old fairground for extraction. Unfortunately, a lot more infected escaped the firebombing than anyone realized. They swarm in just as Flynn arrives, and the situation gets even worse when this guy, just a random guy tagging along, panics and jumps on the helicopter skids. That sends Flynn careening off through a group of infected and forces Doyle, Scarlett, and the kids to run for safety. But safety is a rare luxury in this world. Back in the city, they immediately bump into a new threat, a wall of poison gas, and a patrol of soldiers with flamethrowers out mopping up any traces of infection. They take shelter in a car, which protects them from the gas and the infected, but not the soldiers. And when it won't start, Doyle makes the ultimate sacrifice. He gets out and pushes the car. He's only known these people a couple hours, but it's clear that Doyle understands how vital they are if this infection continues to rage out of control. What's his life when weighed against the possible extinction of the species? Unfortunately, Doyle's sacrifice only buys Scarlett, Andy, and Tammy a few seconds of relief. There's still gas rolling through the streets, and NATO is still determined to kill anything that moves, even if they're driving a car and clearly not infected. So Scarlett takes them off the street and into the worst type of place to be if you're a character in a 28 Days Later movie, a subway. Yep, pretty much. They abandon the car and head deeper into the underground on foot, using the night vision scope on Doyle's rifle to make their way through the pitch-black tunnels. And just when you think everything couldn't get creepier, here comes Don again. Don, right? Somehow he escaped the mayhem in District 1 and shuffled into the same subway tunnel as his two children. He kills Scarlett and then bites Andy moments before Tammy shoots him. Sure, it's a little contrived, but there's a sort of poetic justice to it if you feel like reading into it. The man who said whatever it took to make his family like him, shot down by his own daughter. One thing's for sure, this family has the worst luck in the entire apocalypse. Like the rage virus itself, Tammy and Andy then spread their bad luck to the rest of the world. Andy, of course, is fine. He's infected, but he's a carrier like his mom was. After making their way back to the surface, they meet up with Flynn at Wembley Stadium. Flynn doesn't know anything about carriers and doesn't question why this boy is probably bleeding profusely after having his neck torn into by Don. All he knows is that Doyle wanted these kids taken across the English Channel, so that's what he does.
Come on!
With major parts of London in flame and ruin below, they leave Britain for mainland Europe, overcoming the one obstacle that has so far prevented the virus from escaping to the rest of the world. It's not clear exactly what happens after that, but it isn't good. After another time jump of 28 days, we see Flynn's abandoned helicopter and hear a garbled voice on the radio requesting help. Then we see infected swarming Paris. It leaves you with some questions for sure. How did Andy end up infecting everybody? Did he sneeze on a French person? Bleed in someone's mouth? The movie leaves all that a little open-ended, but thanks to the heroic actions of literally everyone in the story, the world is now much, much worse off than it was before.